So you take economics, and I remember one time you telling me that your father said, I'm not sure about business, you should stick with engineering, but you get into the University of Chicago, and you graduate from the University of Chicago, and then you meet another person who becomes a mentor to you, is David Rockefeller at Chase Manhattan back then. I mean, like not stumbling, because obviously you graduated from the University of Chicago with honors, but anyway, but stumbling is probably not the right word, but then progressing then and meeting people like that. So what is that like? So you're one of the youngest vice presidents at one point of Chase Manhattan?
Well, I've been blessed that people have invested in me over a long period of time, and when we help young people today, it's a little bit like David said, the only thing we ask of them is that they follow through in the next generation and do the same thing for the next generation. So I was a young kid. I graduated, I got a scholarship at the University of Chicago and graduated from there and went to work for the Chase Manhattan Bank. And David Rockefeller got his PhD from the University of Chicago, took an interest in me and helped me out. And you know, I got great assignments on my own. I remember going to the 17th floor of the One Chase Manhattan Plaza, which is downtown, still exists at the moment, but at the time it was a very contemporary building. And those of you who remember, I mean, he had very contemporary art. You know, he had two buffets out there, which nobody understood what they were at the time. He had a couple of calders there, and he had a collection of African sculpture that he and his sons collected. And he really supported, at the time, people from all over the world. He was the internationalist. He was the public face of the institution. And there was a chief operating officer by the name of George Champion, who was the tough guy who really ran the business, you know, day to day. But I learned enormously. I mean, I got an MBA from the university, but I went through another whole training program at the Chase that really prepared me for a career and gave me the basis of the opportunity to learn finance in a macro level. And I attribute the University of Chicago and the Chase Manhattan Bank for forming the basis for a career in the last 45 years that has allowed me to do what I'm doing.
Earlier, and I've heard you speak many times, and earlier David and Jim have talked about it different times, about this idea of pushing yourself out of a comfort zone into something, you know, new, challenging, different, and then you go from the banking side into a corporation at PepsiCo. And talk about that. And
well, I was always adventurous. So, you know, when you go from Israel to America, I mean, that's a slightly different comfort zone, without your parents helping you out a lot. So when I started in the banking business, and I did very well there, as Brian mentioned, I was the youngest vice president at the age of 28 at the time. Today, unless you're a managing partner at 28, you think you're a failure. But at the time, became vice president at 28, that was a pretty big deal. But I was then on the corporate side, and I was a consultant. And I really wanted to do things. I really wanted to get on the inside. And that's when I left to go to PepsiCo. So I became an assistant treasurer at PepsiCo. And that was a whole different environment, because PepsiCo was already in purchase at the time, which was, you know, very, very lovely. And it was a corporation. So now you're in the inside of a corporation, and you find out all the things that you thought you knew as a banker are nothing more than approximations of reality from the inside. But there's another fellow there by the name of Don Kendall, who's still alive and still I consider to be one of my great mentors. By the way, David Rockefeller is still alive as well. 93, I think. Yeah, that's right. And Kendall just turned 90 overall. But I'm only 49, so it's all right. Who, again, takes an interest in me and, you know, exposes me to a global environment, because PepsiCo at the time was opening up, and he was then doing the barter deal with the Russians, you remember that he brought Stolichnaya to the United States and bartered them PepsiCo concentrate at the time. And again, has been a friend and a mentor and a supporter ever since. Invited me to his 90th birthday party, which was thrown by the Russian ambassador because of all the stuff that he did for the Soviet Union. And again, the mark of Don Kendall was that his birthday party, 4 former secretaries of state of the United States show up for this birthday party there. And the MC is Jim Baker, his wonderful friend. So role models in life of leadership are very, very important. And role models that really take an interest in you and really support you. And the third big role model that I had is here in Philadelphia, was Bill Fishman, who was one of the original founders of the old Automatic Retailers of America, which is what became ARA, then became ARAMARK. And the company, interestingly enough, has only had 3 CEOs in its 75-year history. So longevity is again part of culture, part of value system, part of how you build corporate characters. And you know, the joke that I have with my own team and with other people is that all the mistakes that the company has made in the last 30 years are mine, and I can't run away from them. And look, corporate life and success is nothing more than a scorecard, right? It's just like any sports. Nobody's perfect. And if you have a 500 batting average, it's pretty good. And I think we've had as a team, as a management team, better than an average batting score, but it's not 1,000. So if you're seeking perfection in leadership, it doesn't exist. It's just a question of, are you making more of the right decisions than the wrong decision, and are you proactive in terms of making decisions?